It's waxing lyrical, baby.
Hello, Waxers, and welcome to Waxing Lyrical, Mainz and Dutts. I'm your host, Mainz, and my colleague in the danger zone in Rainford is Mr. Neil Dutton. How are we, Neil?
Ho, 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 and all things of such.
Christmas is upon us. We are Thursday, Christmas is Sunday. Good stuff, as always. Normal show, though. We're going to give you some Mainz events. We're going to give you fancy darlings, fancy losers, and fancy predictions bound to go wrong. Boy, were we close last week on those fancy predictions, but as the great Gorilla Monsoon once told us, close only counts in horseshoes and hand grenades, Neil.
He did. Very wise man.
Without further ado, let's get on with the show and let's get on with the Mainz event.
Time now for the main event.
Sad news first, Neil. Two losses in the NFL world this week. Firstly, Franco Harris, former running back of the Pittsburgh Steelers, whose number was actually being retired this week. So in the game against the Las Vegas Raiders, and it was also the 50-year anniversary of the Immaculate Reception. And also Ronnie Hillman, former running back of the Denver Broncos, was the leading rusher and rushing touchdowns during the Peyton Manning Super Bowl year. Neil, do you want to share some thoughts on Franco Harris?
There is a few people, a few players, coaches, teams that are basically immortalised because of one game, one play in the NFL. Now, Franco Harris obviously had a Hall of Fame career. I think when he retired, he was the all-time leading rusher in the NFL at that stage. He did reach or pad out that last year by playing for Seattle, which no one really likes to talk about. But while it may surprise people who've come to the NFL fairly recently, who know that, the Pittsburgh Steelers are always up there when it comes to the playoffs and that Mike Tomlin has never, had a losing season. When Chuck Noll took over in the 1970s, the Steelers were a joke. They were literally a legitimately terrible team. But over the course of a few years, they started drafting, this is an interesting theory, started drafting good players.
Yeah, interesting concept.
Yep. And one of those players was Franco Harris. Now, when they were playing against the Oakland Raiders in the 1972 AFC playoffs, I don't think they hadn't won a playoff game since the Truman administration. And they were not winning this one until the Immaculate Reception. As I say, it's one of those plays that, by modern rules, this is nothing impressive.
Yeah.
Because the rules at the time were that only one player on the receiving team could touch the ball. So if, Terry Bradshaw throws a pass, if, Stallworth or whoever it was, or Frenchie Fuqua, I think it was, if they'd caught it and then parried it up to Franco Harris, at the time, that would not have been allowed. So the great controversy is that Terry Bradshaw threw the ball, Fuqua went up with, I think it was Phil Villapiano. They came together. The ball then flew to Franco Harris, who was supposed to be blocking on the play, but decided he couldn't be bothered. So he went out, and he caught the rebound and ran it in. Massive controversy at the time. It was called a touchdown. There was phone calls to the league office, and eventually they just said to the ref, well, what did you rule? I ruled touchdown. Then we're going to have to go touchdown. And, it was called the Immaculate Reception in Pittsburgh, but in Oakland it was known as the Bullshit Reception. And from that moment on, the arrow only pointed up for the Steelers. So that play changed NFL history. Franco Harris was a big part of the 4 Super Bowl winning teams. As I say, he was one of the all-time leading rushers in the NFL. And by all accounts, he was a Hall of Famer as both a player and a person. So obviously, it's desperately sad as well with the timing. 50th anniversary of the Immaculate Reception, Christmas Eve, retiring his jersey. It's just a horrible, horrible timing, and it's terribly sad news.
Yeah, if you go to Pittsburgh Airport, I believe there's a statue of Franco Harris. He seems like a lovely man. I was listening to the football GM podcast earlier today, and oh my goodness, I've forgotten the GM's name who they have on. He helped sign him for Seattle after he was cut by Pittsburgh, and they had nothing but good things to say. And it's one of them in terms of Ronnie Hillman. Obviously, not as famous, not as star-studded, but a player in the NFL who won a Super Bowl. He was a leading rusher, leading touchdown guy in the year that Peyton Manning won the Super Bowl with the Denver Broncos. Lost the fight with cancer. Just horrible situation, I think. Early 30s, really something that you don't want to see, and tragic for his family. I think he has some children, and on everyone who knows him. So we send our thoughts to everyone who knows Franco Harris and Ronnie Hillman, and hope they're all doing okay. Neil, let's move on and let's talk injuries, and a big injury in your life. We now know that Jalen Hurts had a separated shoulder during the game against the Chicago Bears, and based on that, is now out for a period of time. Unsure when, how long. We do know for one thing he's not playing this week. I guess my question is, when would you play him again?
The playoffs, there's absolutely no reason to risk him. The Eagles have got 3 games left. They need 1 win, or they need a Vikings loss to clinch the number 1 seed in the NFC. The Eagles are playing the Cowboys, obviously. This was a bigger game a few weeks ago. Before then, the results last week made it a little less significant. The Cowboys are nicked up. The Eagles potentially could beat them. Everyone, there's been a popular narrative that Jalen Hurts has not played well and he's a product of the system. Well, if that's the case, then the Eagles should go and wipe the floor with the Cowboys then, shouldn't they? So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. Gardner Minshew is a capable backup who can come in and steady the ship for a few weeks. And as I say, this isn't Minshew walking into the Jaguars back in the day. This is Minshew walking into a team with an exceptional offensive line, with 2 fantastic wide receivers, with a ground game that in theory does work. They just decided to not involve the running back so much last week. The Eagles' defense is beating up people. They are crushing souls, quite frankly. The Eagles can beat the Cowboys, but even if they don't, their next 2 games are the Saints and the Giants. They only need 1 win. Now, it would be incredibly Eagle-ish to go 0-3 in this span, but I don't think they will. So there's obviously Jalen Hurts wants to play. He has that mentality. He's a I hate to say it, he's a gladiator. But if the Eagles can be smart with him and get him to buy in, there is absolutely no reason for him to play now. Sorry about that. No reason for him to play until the playoffs, because now you're looking, he could get a month's rest. So I don't know whether, if he's, depending on how this week goes, you want to play him for a series or until the game's done and be sensible with him against the Saints, not play him against the Giants. It all depends on the results, but I don't think they have to play him. So if they're sensible and they are forward-thinking, they won't.
I agree with that, and I don't think he needs to play for them to finish as the 1 seed. I think they are the best team in the conference and the best roster in the conference, and Gardner Minshew is a more than capable backup. It's a very different offense, and we ran very differently, but I don't think that should stop them from being able to throw on the Dallas Cowboys, who, as you said, injured very much on defense. What I would say is my fear of not playing him until the playoffs is that's 5 weeks. That is an extended period of not playing in the NFL. So yes, because if you get the 1 seed, that would also mean that you have a bye. So you've got those 3 weeks and then a week off and then you play. I do think that's probably too much of an extended break, which falls into an issue, I guess. Can he be fit for the Giants game? The interesting thing is the Saints game the week before. The Eagles hold the New Orleans Saints draft pick, so not that the Eagles don't want to win every game, by the way, but if you were going to win one of the 3 games, weirdly, when the 2 others are divisional games, the game you actually want to win is the Saints game, because if you win the Saints game, that means you will be in the you will get a better draft position. I do like that as a concept. I think he will play. I think he will probably play the final week, maybe a half. I just think you need to play if you're going to have 5 weeks off. 5 weeks off seems like a lot as a quarterback. He's he's more than reasonably. He is a young player who's not had much time in the NFL.
Yeah, that's fair. I'd say I would hate for him to come back too early and jeopardize a potentially massive payday. And I've done this. Eagles #1 seed MVP caliber quarterback injured. Lightning can't strike again. So I'd rather not.
And that makes sense, Neil. And that makes sense. I do the touchdown review, as you know. Myself, a Washington fan. Thomas, Falcons. Callum, Dolphins. Taib, Lions. Joe, Browns. We saw a play that one of those teams will be proud of last week, and it was done by the New England Patriots. We know teams can do that because we've seen them do it, and you would expect that to happen to a Washington, to a Cleveland, etc., etc. How have we got to a situation that this is a Pats play?
Because they're broken on offense. If the plan was Stevenson's going to have a carry and then we'll just go to overtime, why not just kneel down? You've put your players who want to make plays. You can see Mac Jones screaming after every play. Mac Jones, by the way, fills his nappy an awful lot for a player who makes some very bad plays. But anyway, I digress. You put these players in a position where they think we can make a play here. And they're going to try it. Whereas if you just said, we're going to play for overtime, we'll do them, don't worry. They might not like it, but you get there. The question I have, of course, is, why didn't Mac Jones literally grab anything of Chandler Jones to stop him? Face mask, bollocks, anything. Just take the penalty. They're not going to give a touchdown. The game's going to be... Obviously, the game can't end on a defensive penalty, but they're going to get the ball, at best, 30 yards out. So embrace variance. The Patriots, offensively, it's terrible. It's an absolute joke. And we've talked in the past that it looks a little bit old. It looks a little bit like, Papa only wants to talk to his friends and family at the moment. You start to wonder whether Robert Kraft is going to approach the GM and coach and say, it's time you started treating your coaching staff the way you treat your players. I.e., if it's not working, get them out. If you want to keep them around, that's great. They can't call an offense. We thought that Mac Jones came in and looked pro-ready. Probably limitations. Probably didn't have the upside and the ceiling of players like Justin Fields and whatnot. But he came in and could execute an NFL offense adequately. This is not an NFL offense. And he cannot, at the moment, elevate this sorry group of pass catchers. He can't elevate them. The scheme isn't helping. The play calling isn't helping. But the Patriots look broken. And if you start looking at the AFC East, they're the team that out of all four of them, you literally have to look at them and say, I don't see, when are they going to be good again? Because the Jets, Zach Wilson's not the answer. I don't think today's the day to go into that. He's not.
Yeah.
So they need to start thinking, okay, how do we get someone in who can just facilitate? We've got a great defense. We're going to have a good running game. We're going to have Breece Hall back. We've got wonderful wide receivers. Zach Wilson cannot take us down. I say the Dolphins have got an offense that suits the players they have. The Bills are the Bills. The Patriots, you're not going to get better on offense over one off season. I don't care who you call in to call the plays. The receiving talent is negligible. The offensive line has struggled. Defense is good, but it's no longer. I don't think it's not the shutdown unit it once was. Matt Judon probably going to want paying again. Well, this is Patriots time to start shipping him out. So you have to start looking at the coach and saying, come on, this is going to be, they haven't won a playoff game since the Super Bowl after 2018. Now, I say, we know, and as you've said in the past, the Patriots ruined it for football for everyone because it looks normal to be dominant. But they've dropped off, and idiots, I will say idiots, will look at it and say, oh, it must have been Brady then. Yeah. Everything came together and worked. It's now not working. And they have to be, as I say, they need to be as ruthless with this coaching staff as the coach is with the players. When they're not up to it anymore, when he thinks he can do better, they move him on.
There's an interesting situation here where you need to think of, do you trust a human to tell you who the best person to take over their job is, coldly and without bias? Because right now, I assume what Robert Kraft is doing is allowing Bill Belichick to ready or pick who is going to be the next head coach of the New England Patriots. That can cause all sorts of trouble. Ask Manchester United.
Ooh.
What I would say about Manchester United, however, is something that the New England Patriots are not doing. Is Alex Ferguson was renowned for bringing in new minds, new voices, and new ideas to his coaching staff to make him a better manager. So he started with Brian Kidd, went to Steve McLaren, had Carlos Queiroz, multiple other guys. Okay, he shouldn't have picked David Moyes, but while he was there, he mixed it up a lot that allowed the Manchester United team to be very different from the team of late 1980s, early 90s to the team of 2015. It's very easy for me to say this because I'm not emotionally invested and not won 6 Super Bowls. But if I was Robert Kraft, I'd say, Bill, you're the greatest coach of all time, and I want you to continue to be the coach. But I'm hiring a GM, and I want you to hire a defensive coordinator and an offensive coordinator you do not know. Because that's how these things work. Because if you don't, how do you get new ideas? Bill Belichick is the greatest coach of all time. Do you know how I know that? Well, first of all, he's won a boatload of Super Bowls. And second of all, he's won 7 games with this team. His team is absolutely awful. On offense, it is unwatchable. Seriously, who on this roster makes the Philadelphia Eagles team? None of them. Kansas City Chiefs team? None of them. Buffalo Bills team? Possibly the running back. Do you know what I mean? Like, what are we playing at here? Like, and they're still winning 7 games. That's how good he is. That's super amazing. But did he want to win? Did he want to win 8 to 9 games a year? Or did he want to win 14? Because if he want to win 14, he needs to blow up the ideas that he's got and be given something new. Neil, the hot stories in the league, the feel-good stories of the league are two teams in 2 conferences. Right now, the Detroit Lions and the Jacksonville Jaguars. Depending on how me, you, or Ben say it. Are they
He's
hot?
wrong.
He's American. They say things wrong. It's fine. Are they hot stories of this year, or are these the up-and-coming franchises of the NFL?
Well, everything was painted for the Jaguars to take a massive step forward just because they got Urban Meyer out of the building. So the improvements that team has made, they solidified the offensive line. They brought in talent to surround Trevor Lawrence with. Trevor Lawrence has taken steps because he has a grown-up calling the plays for him. The Lions, for a minute, it looked like we'd all been suckered in by the Hard Knocks feel good. That we wanted to root for this team. We loved how intense Juice Staley was, that he lost his voice during practice. We loved that, Aaron Glenn was bigging up a 6th-round rookie in front of his veterans, saying, I don't want to be giving this guy the to playing time, but you're making it happen, while also then praising him. And it just looks like, the Jaguars they both had a promising start, disappointing middle bit, and then all of a sudden, it's come good. And there's a lot to like about both teams. And bear in mind, this was the teams who picked first and second in the draft this past year. It's in their own hands to make the playoffs this year. Turnaround can happen in the NFL ridiculously quickly. So these stories are great. And especially the Lions are going to get a high pick anyway because they've got the Rams one. So they can only, you think about it, they look like they can only keep getting better. The problem we've got with the Jags is we've had false dawns before. 2017, the AFC Championship game, and haven't done a damn thing since. So we've seen that they can disappoint us. But for now, you're hard-pressed to look at those two teams and say, the Eagles have won 13 games. Nick Sirianni will probably get Coach of the Year because of that.
Mm-hmm.
Brian Daboll has made the same players who were god-awful last year competitive. But in terms of, look how downtrodden these teams are. And here we are in week 16, and they're both relevant. You could argue, give it to Doug Peterson and Dan Campbell, both former players, by the way, of course. These are stories that make you feel good because the NFL brought in salary cap and, free agency because they wanted parity. They've never had parity. Never. Hasn't happened once. But there is a sign that these teams, they're just doing the right things and that maybe they won't be cellar dwellers forever. They can have a few years of being competitive.
They never have parity because teams are bad at making decisions. But what the Lions especially show is, if you make consistently good decisions, good results will follow. Get adults in the room making sensible decisions, logical decisions, and good things will happen.
And be patient.
Yeah, you've got to be patient as well. They were 1-6 or whatever, and people were wondering, is this Dan Campbell for real? A year into the Trevor Lawrence experience, and everyone's like, oh, well, this was a generational talent, and I don't see it. Yeah, well, his head coach was Meyer. There's a reason. I think if we talk short-term, long-term, short-term, that the Lions are better. I think they're great. I think they're the third best team in the NFC right now, today. My problem is ceiling. And the ceiling is Jared Goff. Now, that ceiling may be an NFC title game, like a Jimmy Garoppolo, right? Or a Super Bowl like Jared Goff. But is it consistent, great quarterback play? No, it's not. So there's something to feed on. The ceiling's different for the Jags because if Trevor Lawrence continues to play the way Trevor Lawrence has played, it's game on. He just needs weapons. Put Trevor Lawrence with Amon-Ra St. Brown and Swift and Williams and Shaw, you're in business. So are these two teams right now favourites to win their division in 2023? Absolutely. I think it's a no-brainer. Like, people, Vikings, right? Like, the Lions will be better on defense next year. They're better on offense, and the quarterback's a wash. Like, why would they not? Why would they not be better? The Jags are in the AFC South. It's pretty easy to be good. It's pretty easy to be the best team in that division, so that's not necessarily as complicated. It's good that these teams are good, especially the Lions. Like, people should wait until the whole situation with their quarterback. People wanted the Browns to be good, right? These are teams that have been bad for as long as anyone can remember. So them being good is a good thing, and it shows that it can happen. And I hope it continues. And I'll be honest, like I'm a Commanders fan, as you well know. I'd much prefer to see the Lions playing in the playoffs than Washington right now. And that's nothing against my team. It's everything against my owner. Neil, I said that I thought the Lions were the third best team in the NFC. What I would say is, I believe the best two teams in their conferences right now on play based on injuries before Charles starts attacking us in a text thread are the San Francisco 49ers and the Cincinnati Bengals. Which one is less likely to make the Super Bowl for you?
Less likely would be the 49ers because he's playing well. I may speak about him later. Brock Purdy was the last pick in the draft for a damn reason. We just haven't seen that reason yet. Now, we've seen teams with backup quarterbacks, run hot, stay pure, and win the Super Bowl. I know.
I was going to say, yeah. You've seen that before, right?
Yeah, I've seen that movie. It's great. It's heartwarming. And it makes for an inspirational episode of America's Game 12 months later. But Brock Purdy has enjoyed his schedule. He's made some good plays, don't get me wrong. But, as I say, he was a limited quarterback. That was why 255 players got drafted ahead of him. He is averaging a touchdown for every 101 passing yards. As our friend JJ Zachariason points out, the NFL average this season is one touchdown for every 178 passing yards. So regression is coming. He hasn't had the game where it's like, he hasn't had a game of multiple, Jesus Christ, Kirk, what are you doing? Moments, that Kirk Cousins is capable of. He hasn't done that. But I have to preface it with he hasn't done that yet. Mm-hmm. The Bengals look dangerous because they're coming off a Super Bowl appearance where everyone thought, oh, it's the Bengals. Wasn't that nice, though? And then they started the season a little bit iffy. But now, in the last 5 weeks, where they didn't have Jamar Chase for the bulk of it, it has literally been, right, Siggy's out, boys, let's go to work. Their defense isn't great, but it's opportunistic and it makes plays. And as I say, they've got playmakers on offense. The offensive line is coming together. It's still not great, but it's coming together and it's protecting. And we said this last year on several occasions leading up to the Super Bowl. Joe Burrow's just got something about him.
What I would say is if we do, in my opinion, if we do it logically, the answer is the Cincinnati Bengals, and I'll explain why. For the San Francisco 49ers, I believe there's one team who can beat them realistically to stop them making the Super Bowl, and that is Philadelphia Eagles, which I think is the best roster in the division, in the league, and have been fantastic all season. What I would say is, if you are the Cincinnati Bengals, you have to beat the Chiefs, the Bills, to a lesser extent the Chargers. There's other teams you've got to beat. So I would say, for me, it's less likely that the Bengals make it, but that's just kind of where we are in relation to it. It's not something that I would write home. They're both playing excellent ball at the moment. That is for sure. That is for sure. That is it for the news section of the show, Neil. Let's get on with the fancy portion. Let's start with Fancy Darling.
Hello, darling.
Last week, 1-0. Why only 1-0? Because Neil picked Mike White and he didn't play. So that's a null and void. Neil did pick the Denver Broncos defense and special teams. They were DST 6, 12 points, 3 interceptions and 3 sacks. Big win.
Don't watch that game again.
Don't watch that once. Anyone who watched it once is a psychopath. What is your pick this week, first of all?
First one is Brock Purdy. Now, as I said, he has a bad game coming, but I don't think it's going to be this week. Now, I'm not saying that Washington are not a good defense. They are. I say Purdy has got 6 touchdown passes against 1 interception in 3 games, and he's thrown exactly 2 touchdowns in each game, and he's only taken 4 sacks. The Washington defense is not a bad defense. They haven't allowed more than 200 passing yards in any of their last 5 games. But Purdy still has George Kittle. He's got Brandon Ayuk. He's got a good running game. And also Kyle Shanahan is the coach of the San Francisco 49ers. And he's playing the Washington football team.
You're suggesting, Neil, that he may try and, run it up a little bit if possible?
I believe it was Shakespeare who wrote, "Cry havoc and let slip the dogs of war." I worry that despite the feel good in the Pro Bowl videos, that last week the stuffing might have been taken completely out of Washington. And we're going to see this team now fall off. And I think that starts this week, and Purdy will help.
What I want to say quickly on that is there's 2 things. The issue for Purdy may be, I think that if Kyle goes down that avenue, he might try and run it down their throat. But yes, the other thing I just quickly want to say is I've seen a lot of noise about the officiating in the Washington New York Giants game, and there was a lot of bad officiating all weekend. It was terrible, truly awful. They played the New York Giants, and after 59 minutes of the game, they had 12 points. So there's a little bit of, yeah, you're right, but cry me a river. Like, you got to score more points than 12. Sorry, this is just not how it goes. So, and for those who are keeping score at home, based on this game, next week and sometime in this game, the starting quarterback of the Washington Commanders will be Carson Wentz. Neil, who's your second pick?
Second pick, again, we'll go with the defense. Because when fancy, semi-final week, this is where you need to have the little edges. So a good edge, especially as the Indianapolis Colts have made another quarterback change, with Super Bowl hero Big Dick Nick Foles is now under center for the Colts. But I think that's just all the more reason to fire up the Los Angeles Chargers defense. They have 6 sacks in their last 2 games and have 3 interceptions in their last 4. And whoever has played quarterback for the Colts this season, they've absorbed 49 total sacks and they lead the league in turnovers lost. So if you need a defense, plug in the Chargers.
Chargers on a run. Can't wait to see how they blow it. It's going to be epic. Let's move on. Let's get on to Fancy Loser. What I would describe as a surprising loss last week, Neil. You picked Tua to be a bad quarterback in the snow. And he wasn't really. He was quarterback 12, 18 points, 17 of 30, 234 yards. 2 touchdowns and an interception. What I would say on that is you've lost 3 games on the run, Miami, but I'm weirdly encouraged. And we'll come on to that one a bit later in a pick for me later on. Neil, who's your loser this week?
I'm going to stay quarterback. And I'm going to say that, well, I'm going to ask you a question. Would it surprise you if I told you that Dak Prescott hasn't passed for 300 yards in a game this season?
It would surprise me. But what I would say is I don't know what's going on this season, but no effort in the whole league seems to be able to throw for 300 yards apart from Patrick Mahomes.
Would it surprise you if Dak Prescott had 4 games this season in which he's thrown 2 interceptions, given how careful he usually is with the ball?
I like the Stephen A. Smith narrative you're building, Neil. Carry on, keep going.
This season, Dak Prescott has had 4 games in which he's finished as a QB1. One of them was last week. You'd say even then he threw 2 interceptions. I know one of them wasn't his fault, Cry Me a River. Still says interception in the book. He's not having a great fantasy season. In overall fantasy points, he's the quarterback 25. Now, I know he hasn't played a full season, but in points per game, he's the quarterback 18. He's averaging a career low 18.7 PPR points per game. It's actually tied with a career low from 2017. Doesn't run anymore. So he doesn't have that impact. He has one rushing touchdown. He's only averaging 3.9 yards per carry. The Eagles have been very good against quarterbacks this season. Last week was a bad one because they let Justin Fields run all over them. He scored 25 fantasy points. But they haven't allowed a quarterback to amass more than 169 passing yards in their last 4 games. Now, those 4 quarterbacks were Aaron Rodgers, Ryan Tannehill, Daniel Jones, and Justin Fields. But all 4 of those teams want to run the ball. That's their identity. And that's what the Cowboys do. So I'm not saying that, the Cowboys are just going to say, oh, Dak, you don't have to pass it this week. I just think that they're going to try and do most of their damage on the ground through Tony Pollard and Ezekiel Elliott, and Dak can facilitate. So I don't think, if you've got no other option but to start him in your fantasy semi-final, then you're probably going to, because unless Brock Purdy's available. But the chances are, if Dak Prescott's been your quarterback this season, you haven't made the fantasy semi-finals.
Great stuff, Neil. Let us get on with fantasy predictions. Bound to go wrong. Neil, tough week last week, and I'll explain why. Let's go with you first. You picked Isaiah Pacheco to be running back 1. Now you may say he wasn't, so what's the problem? The issue is, Neil, who was running back 1?
His teammate,
Jerick McKinnon. 10 rushes for 52 yards and a score, 8 catches, 70 yards and a touchdown. 34.2 points. Right idea, wrong execution. We thought that Kansas City would run it well. They did. We just got the wrong player. I said that there'd be a slop fest in relation to the Baltimore Ravens against the Cleveland Browns. There was. I said that defense and special teams would be the highest scoring person in that game. The highest defense and special teams in that game was the Cleveland Browns with 13 points. Let's look at some other scores. Quarterbacks, Deshaun Watson, 12.6. Tyler Huntley, 5.0. Running backs, Chubb, 9.9. Wide receiver, Demarcus Robinson, 6.9. Tight ends, Njoku and Andrews, 5.8 and 6.1 respectively. However, J.K. Dobbins, 13.8. Donovan Peoples-Jones, 13.1. Close only counting horseshoes and hand grenades, Neil. The Browns only got 13 points. Therefore, it was a loss. 0-2. Never mind. This week, going to give you some numbers, Neil. You hit me with some stats. I'm going to hit you with some. 9 catches, 184 yards and 2 touchdowns against Justin Jefferson. 5 catches, 73 yards and a touchdown against Terry McLaurin. 6 catches, 108 yards and 1 score for Stephon Diggs. And CeeDee Lamb got 11 catches, 150 yards and 2 touchdowns. That is against a Green Bay Packers offense that refuses to play man. This week, they play the Miami Dolphins. The Miami Dolphins duo of Hill and Waddle will combine for 350 yards and 3 touchdowns this week against the Green Bay Packers on Christmas Day.
Quite a cracker.
Yourself, Neil?
I'm going to steal your theme from last week, and I'm going to say that no player in the game between the Cleveland Browns and the New Orleans Saints will crack double-digit fantasy points this week. They're going to be playing essentially in a washing machine. The over-under for this game is 37 points. I'm taking the under. It's going to get played, on the shores of Lake Erie. Chris Olave's been ruled out. The Browns' offense looks pop. It's certainly not going to look much better in these conditions. So I'm taking yours. There will not be anyone who will emerge from this game with double-digit fantasy points.
Love it, Neil. Love it. That is it for the show. Neil, where can people catch you before we're back next week?
When we return next week, having enjoyed Christmas with our families, I can be found on Twitter at @NNutton13. Read my stuff at Numberfire, at Rotoviz, at Player Profiler, at 4for4 Football, and also this month's edition of Gridiron Magazine, where I recap my adventures in Munich.
Amazing. Amazing stuff. I am at Mainz7. Come by me at waxing_lyrical. Touchdown review this week. We talked what would you get your franchise for Christmas? And we also try to improve upon our 10-0 picks last week, where we got 5 locks right and 5 upsets right. Boy, were we on fire. Go us. Neil, I wish you a happy Christmas. I wish everyone listening a happy Christmas. We'll see you before the New Year, so we'll wish you it then. These top guys are out.
God bless us, everyone.